The rain hammered against the windows of the black sedan as it pulled up to the wrong mansion. 9-year-old Amara Washington pressed her face against the cold glass, her breath fogging the window as she stared at the massive stone structure before her. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The social worker had given the driver the wrong address, and now she sat outside a house that looked more like a castle than a home. Her small hands gripped the straps of her torn backpack, the only thing she owned that held her few possessions. Inside were 2 changes of clothes, a worn teddy bear named Button, and a photo of her parents who died when she was 4. 5 years in the foster system had taught her not to get her hopes up, but something about this moment felt different. Terrifying but different. The driver turned around, his voice cutting through her thoughts. "This is it, kid. The Torres mansion. Your new family is waiting inside." Amara's stomach dropped. Torres. The paperwork said Henderson. She knew because she'd memorized every detail about the family who might adopt her. Richard and Margaret Henderson, both in their 50s, no children, lived in a mansion on Elm Street. But this was Oak Avenue, and the mailbox clearly read Torres. "Are you sure this is right?" Amara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The driver checked his GPS and shrugged. "This is the address they gave me. Out you go." Thunder crashed overhead as Amara stepped out of the car, rain immediately soaking through her thin jacket. The sedan pulled away before she could ask any more questions, leaving her standing alone on the circular driveway. The mansion loomed above her, its windows glowing warmly against the dark storm clouds. She had 2 choices: stand in the rain and get soaked, or knock on the door of strangers and hope they wouldn't turn her away. The decision was made for her when lightning split the sky, and she ran toward the massive front door. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be completely alone in the world with nowhere to go? Amara's story will touch your heart and remind you that family isn't always about blood. Please subscribe to hear how this little girl's life changes forever, and let me know in the comments what you think she should do next. Before she could lose her nerve, Amara pressed the doorbell. The sound echoed through the house and she heard footsteps approaching. The door opened to reveal a beautiful woman with warm brown eyes and dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a comfortable sweater and jeans, looking nothing like the formal photos Amara had seen of Margaret Henderson. "Oh my goodness," the woman said, immediately kneeling down to Amara's level. "Sweetheart, you're soaked. Come in, come in." "I think there's been a mistake," Amara started to explain, but the woman was already ushering her inside. "I'm Elena Torres," she said, wrapping a soft throw blanket around Amara's shoulders. "And you must be freezing. Let's get you warmed up first and then we can talk about everything else." The entrance hall was bigger than any room Amara had ever lived in. A crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, and a curved staircase led to the 2nd floor. But what struck her most wasn't the wealth on display but the warmth. Family photos covered a side table, plants sat in every corner, and the smell of something delicious came from what she assumed was the kitchen. "Ricardo," Elena called out. "Can you come here please?" A tall man with kind eyes and graying temples appeared, wearing a casual button-down shirt and khakis. When he saw Amara, his expression immediately softened with concern. "This little one was standing in the rain," Elena explained. "She's soaked through." Of course," Ricardo said, crouching down beside his wife. "I'm Ricardo Torres. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Amara Washington," she said, still clutching her backpack. "But I think I'm at the wrong house. I'm supposed to be at the Hendersons' place." Elena and Ricardo exchanged a look, but neither seemed upset by the news. Instead, Elena's hand found Amara's shoulder in a gentle, reassuring touch. "Well, Amara Washington, regardless of where you're supposed to be, you're here now, and you're not going anywhere in this storm," Elena said firmly. "Let's get you into some dry clothes and something warm to eat. Everything else can wait." As they led her up the stairs, Amara couldn't help but notice how different this felt from every other placement she'd experienced. There was no discussion of rules, no clipboard of regulations, no formal interviews. Just 2 adults who seemed genuinely concerned about her comfort and well-being. The guest room Elena showed her to was bigger than some apartments she'd lived in. A 4-poster bed sat in the center, covered with a fluffy white comforter. Tall windows looked out over a garden, and a bookshelf filled with children's books lined one wall. "I think some of my niece's clothes might fit you," Elena said, pulling items from a dresser. "She's about your age. There are towels in the bathroom, and when you're ready, come downstairs. We'll be in the kitchen." Left alone for the first time since arriving, Amara sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process what was happening. In her experience, adults always wanted to sort out paperwork first, establish boundaries, make sure she understood the rules. But Elena and Ricardo seemed more concerned with making sure she was warm and fed. She changed into the borrowed clothes, a soft pink sweater and jeans that fit perfectly. The towel was fluffy and warm, nothing like the thin one she was used to in foster care. When she caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror, she barely recognized the girl looking back. For the first time in years she didn't look like a foster kid. She looked like someone's daughter. The thought scared her more than she wanted to admit. She'd learned not to get attached, not to hope for permanence. But something about this house, these people, made her want to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have a real family. When she made her way back downstairs, following the sound of gentle conversation and the smell of hot chocolate, she found Elena and Ricardo in a cozy kitchen. They'd set a place for her at a round wooden table, complete with a steaming mug and a plate of chocolate chip cookies. "Feel better?" Elena asked, pulling out a chair for her. Amara nodded, settling into the seat. The hot chocolate was perfect, not too sweet, with marshmallows that melted on her tongue. The cookies were warm like they'd just come out of the oven. "So, Amara," Ricardo said, settling into his own chair, "tell us about yourself. What do you like to do? What's your favorite subject in school?" It was such a normal question the kind parents asked their children, that Amara almost didn't know how to respond. Adults usually asked about her behavioral issues, her placement history, her adjustment challenges. "I like to read," she said quietly. "And I'm good at math. Sometimes I help the younger kids with their homework at the group home." "That's wonderful," Elena said, and her smile seemed genuine. "What kind of books do you like?" For the next hour they talked about books and school and Amara's dreams of maybe becoming a teacher someday. Elena and Ricardo listened to every word, asked follow-up questions and shared their own stories. Elena was a children's book editor, and Ricardo ran a foundation that built schools in underserved communities. They seemed like the kind of people who actually cared about kids, not just as a duty or obligation but because they genuinely enjoyed their company. As the evening wore on, Amara felt something she hadn't experienced in 5 years: peace. Not the temporary calm between storms but actual peace. The kind that made her shoulders relax and her smile come naturally. "I should probably call the agency," she finally said, though every word felt like it was being dragged from her throat. "They'll be wondering where I am." Elena and Ricardo exchanged another look, this one longer and more meaningful. "It's getting late and the storm isn't letting up," Ricardo said gently. "Why don't we call them first thing in the morning? Tonight you're safe and warm and that's what matters most." Amara nodded, relief flooding through her. She wasn't ready to leave this place, these people who made her feel like she mattered. Even if it was just for one night, she wanted to hold on to this feeling of belonging. As Elena showed her back to the guest room and helped her get settled for bed, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The wrong address might have been the most right thing that had ever happened to her. "Sleep tight, sweetheart," Elena said, tucking the covers around her. "We'll be right down the hall if you need anything." After Elena left, Amara lay in the dark, listening to the rain against the windows. For the first time in 5 years she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Maybe, just maybe, being at the wrong address had brought her to exactly where she belonged. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the guest room, and Amara woke to the unfamiliar sound of birds singing instead of traffic or arguing voices. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back. The storm, the wrong address, and Elena and Ricardo Torres who had welcomed her without hesitation. She lay still for several minutes, afraid to move and break whatever spell had brought her to this place. In her experience, good things didn't last long. Someone would realize the mistake soon and she'd be back in the system, just another file to be processed. A gentle knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Amara? Are you awake, sweetheart?" Elena's voice was soft and warm. "Yes, ma'am," Amara called back, sitting up in bed. "May I come in?" Amara nodded, then remembered Elena couldn't see her. "Yes, please." Elena entered carrying a breakfast tray and Amara's eyes widened. In 5 years of foster care, no one had ever brought her breakfast in bed. The tray held pancakes shaped like flowers, fresh strawberries, orange juice, and a small vase with a single daisy. "I thought you might be hungry," Elena said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Ricardo makes the best pancakes in the state, according to his nieces and nephews." The pancakes were light and fluffy, with butter melting into the flower petals and syrup that tasted like it came from real maple trees. Amara ate slowly, savoring each bite and trying not to think about when this would all end. "Did you sleep well?" Elena asked, settling into the chair by the window. "Yes, ma'am. This bed is really comfortable." "I'm glad. You know, you don't have to call me ma'am. Elena is just fine." Amara nodded but knew she'd probably forget. 5 years in the system had taught her that respect was often the difference between a good placement and a bad one. I called the agency this morning, Elena said gently, and Amara's stomach dropped despite the delicious breakfast. They confirmed there was a mix-up with the addresses. You were meant to go to the Henderson family. I know, Amara said quietly, setting down her fork. I'm sorry for the trouble. Trouble? Elena looked genuinely surprised. Amara honey, you're not trouble. You're a gift. Ricardo and we've been trying to have children for years and last night felt like the universe was telling us something. Amara looked up, hope and fear battling in her chest. What do you mean? Elena moved to sit on the edge of the bed, her expression gentle but serious. I mean that sometimes the best things happen when we least expect them. The Hendersons are good people, I'm sure, but they're not here. You are. And if you'll let us, we'd like to spend the day getting to know you better. But what about the agency? Won't they be mad? The agency wants what's best for you, Elena said. And right now what's best is making sure you feel safe and cared for while we figure everything out. No one is going to rush you into anything, I promise. After breakfast, Elena gave Amara a proper tour of the house. It was even bigger than she'd realized, with a library that had floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a sunroom filled with plants, and a playroom that Elena explained was for when their nieces and nephews visited. We've always been the favorite aunt and uncle, Elena said with a laugh. Every birthday party, every school play, every soccer game. But we've never had our own children to spoil. They ended the tour in Ricardo's office, where he was working on his computer but immediately closed the laptop when they entered. How were the pancakes? He asked Amara. The best I've ever had, she said honestly. That's what I like to hear. Are you ready for your next adventure? Amara looked between Elena and Ricardo, confused. Adventure? Well, we can't have you wearing my niece's clothes forever, Elena said. How would you feel about going shopping? Just the three of us. In all her years in foster care, Amara had never gone shopping with potential parents. Usually, her caseworker bought what she needed from discount stores, focusing on practical over personal preference. The idea of choosing her own clothes felt both exciting and terrifying. Is that okay? She asked. I mean, won't it cost a lot of money? Ricardo knelt down to her level, his expression serious but kind. Amara, can I tell you something? Elena and I have been blessed with more money than we could spend in several lifetimes. But money doesn't mean anything if you don't have people to share it with. Spending money on you, making you happy, making sure you have everything you need, that would make us happy too. The shopping trip was unlike anything Amara had ever experienced. Instead of rushing through discount stores with a limited budget, Elena and Ricardo took her to a beautiful children's boutique where the salesperson treated her like she was someone special. What colors do you like? Elena asked as they browsed through racks of beautiful clothes. I don't know, Amara said honestly. I've never really gotten to choose before. Elena's expression softened. Well, then we'll try lots of different colors and see what makes you feel good. They spent the morning trying on clothes in every color and style imaginable. Amara discovered she loved purple and green together, that she felt confident in dresses but comfortable in jeans, and that shoes with sparkles made her want to dance. Ricardo waited patiently outside the dressing room, offering opinions when asked and carrying an ever-growing pile of purchases. When Amara worried about the cost, he simply said, "This is what families do for each other." The word families made her heart skip, but she tried not to read too much into it. Lunch was at a family restaurant where Elena and Ricardo clearly knew the staff. The waitress, Maria, made a big fuss over Amara, bringing her extra whipped cream for her hot chocolate and coloring sheets while they waited for food. Elena and Ricardo have been coming here for years, Maria explained. Always talking about the kids they want to have someday. It's nice to finally meet one of their babies. Amara looked at Elena and Ricardo, expecting them to correct the assumption, but they just smiled. Elena reached over and squeezed her hand gently. Maria's known us since we were newlyweds, Elena said. She's been waiting for us to expand our family almost as long as we have. After lunch, they went to a bookstore where Ricardo told her to pick out any books she wanted. Amara chose carefully, still not quite believing this was real. She selected 5 books, then put 2 back, worried about taking too much. All of them, Ricardo said firmly, adding the returned books to their stack. A good library is never too big. They also bought her school supplies, even though she wouldn't be starting at a new school right away, and art supplies because Elena noticed her drawing on the coloring sheets at lunch. By the time they returned to the house, Amara felt overwhelmed in the best possible way. Her new room, Elena had started calling it, was filled with beautiful clothes, books and art supplies. It looked like a real child's room, not a temporary placement. That evening they ordered pizza and watched a movie together. Amara curled up on the couch between Elena and Ricardo like she belonged there. When she started to fall asleep during the second movie, Ricardo carried her upstairs while Elena got her ready for bed. "Thank you," Amara whispered as Elena tucked her in. "For everything. This was the best day I've ever had." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "Oh, sweetheart, I hope we get to have many more days just like this one." As Elena turned off the light and closed the door, Amara felt something she'd almost forgotten existed: hope. Real hope, not the desperate kind that usually ended in disappointment, but the warm, steady kind that made her believe tomorrow might be even better than today. She drifted off to sleep thinking about how Elena had called it her room, and how Ricardo had said, "This is what families do." Maybe, just maybe, the wrong address had been exactly the right place to end up. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Amara was in the kitchen helping Elena make French toast when the phone rang. Ricardo answered, his voice becoming serious as the conversation progressed. "That was Janet from the agency," he said when he hung up. "She's coming by this afternoon to discuss the situation." Amara's stomach dropped. She'd known this moment would come, but that didn't make it any easier. Elena must have noticed her expression because she immediately wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Hey, it's going to be okay," Elena said softly. "We're just going to talk about what's best for everyone." "The Hendersons," Ricardo added, "have agreed to meet with us as well. They want to make sure you're comfortable with whatever decision gets made." "What do you mean?" Amara asked, though part of her was afraid to hope. Elena and Ricardo exchanged one of their looks, the kind that said they were communicating without words. "We mean," Elena said carefully, "that we've talked to our lawyer, and if you're open to it, if the agency approves, and if all the legal requirements can be met, we'd like to explore the possibility of adopting you ourselves." Amara's French toast caught in her throat. "Really? Really?" Ricardo confirmed. "These past 2 days have been, well, they've been what we always imagined having a family would feel like. You fit here, Amara. With us." Before Amara could respond, Elena continued. "But we want you to know that whatever you decide, we'll support you. If you want to meet the Hendersons, if you think they might be a better fit, we'll understand. We just want you to be happy and loved." Amara looked around the kitchen where she'd helped make breakfast, at the refrigerator where Elena had already put up some of her drawings, at the breakfast table where they'd shared stories and laughter for 2 mornings in a row. Then she looked at Elena and Ricardo, who were watching her with expressions of hope and love that made her chest feel tight. "I want to stay," she whispered, then louder, "I want to stay here. With you." Elena's eyes filled with tears as she pulled Amara into a hug. Ricardo joined them, wrapping his arms around both his girls, and for the first time in 5 years, Amara felt completely, utterly safe. The afternoon brought Janet Morrison, her caseworker, along with the Hendersons. Richard and Margaret Henderson were exactly what Amara had expected from their photos. Well-dressed, formal and kind but distant. They shook hands with everyone and spoke in the careful, measured tones that Amara recognized from dozens of placement meetings. "We're sorry for the confusion," Margaret Henderson said as they all gathered in the Torres living room. "When we realized Amara hadn't arrived as scheduled, we were quite concerned." "Of course," Elena said graciously. "Anyone would be." "We've prepared extensively for Amara's arrival," Richard added. "We have a room ready, we've researched the best schools in our district, and we've already scheduled appointments with a child psychologist to help with her adjustment." Janet nodded approvingly. "The Hendersons have been on our approved adoptive family list for 2 years. They've completed all the required training in home studies." Amara listened to them discuss her future like she wasn't in the room, her heart sinking with every word. This was how it always went. Adults talked about what was best for her without asking what she wanted. "And what about you, Mr. and Mrs. Torres?" Janet asked. "I have to say this is quite unusual. You're not on our list, you haven't completed the required training, and you've only known Amara for 2 days. "That's all true," Ricardo acknowledged. "But sometimes life doesn't follow the usual patterns. Sometimes a child shows up on your doorstep in a storm, and you realize that everything you thought you knew about your future was wrong." "We've already contacted our attorney," Elena added. "We understand there's a process, requirements to meet, home studies to complete. We're prepared to do whatever it takes." Margaret Henderson shifted uncomfortably. "With all due respect, adoption isn't something you decide on a whim. Richard and I have spent months preparing, planning, making sure we can provide the right environment." "You're absolutely right," Elena said, and Amara's heart sank further. But then Elena continued, adoption should never be a whim. That's why we've spent the last 2 days getting to know Amara, not as potential parents evaluating a child, but as people learning to love each other. And what does Amara think about all this? Janet asked, finally turning to her. All eyes in the room focused on Amara, and she felt the familiar panic of being in the spotlight. But then she looked at Elena and Ricardo, who nodded encouragingly, and she found her voice. I want to stay with Elena and Ricardo, she said clearly. They make me feel like I belong. Amara, Margaret Henderson said gently, you've only known them for 2 days. We've been preparing to welcome you into our family for months. I know, Amara said, trying to be respectful but honest. And I'm grateful that you wanted me. But Elena and Ricardo, they don't want to change me or fix me or help me adjust. They just want to love me. The room fell silent. Janet looked between the two families, clearly struggling with the unprecedented situation. This is highly irregular, she finally said. But Amara's feelings have to be taken into consideration. However, Mr. and Mrs. Torres, you need to understand that the adoption process is lengthy and complex. Even if Amara can remain here temporarily, there are no guarantees. We understand, Ricardo said. We're not asking for guarantees. We're asking for a chance to prove that we can be the family Amara deserves. The Hendersons left shortly after, disappointed but gracious. Richard shook Ricardo's hand and told him he hoped everything worked out for the best. Margaret hugged Amara and told her that if things didn't work out with the Torres family, their door would always be open. After they left, Janet sat down with Elena, Ricardo, and Amara to discuss the next steps. I'll be honest, Janet said. In 20 years of social work, I've never seen a situation quite like this. But I've also never seen a child light up the way Amara does when she talks about staying here. She explained the process. Background checks, home studies, parenting classes, psychological evaluations, and months of supervised visits. It would be at least 6 months before any adoption could be finalized, possibly longer. And during that time? Elena asked. Amara can stay here as a foster placement while we work through the adoption process. But you need to understand, if anything goes wrong, if the home study reveals any concerns, if there are any issues at all, she'll be moved to another placement immediately. We understand, Ricardo said. What do we need to do first? As Janet outlined the steps and handed them paperwork, Amara felt a mix of relief and anxiety. She could stay at least for now, but there were so many ways things could still go wrong. That evening, after Janet left and the paperwork was safely filed away, the three of them sat in the garden behind the house. Elena had made hot chocolate, and Ricardo had built a small fire in the outdoor fireplace. Are you scared? Elena asked, settling beside Amara on the outdoor sofa. A little, Amara admitted. What if the social workers decide you're not good enough? What if I do something wrong and they take me away? Hey, Ricardo said, moving to sit on her other side. Look at me, sweetheart. When she did, his expression was serious but warm. Nothing you could do would make us want to give up on this family. Nothing. And as for the social workers, we're going to show them what we already know, that we belong together. Promise? Amara asked, hating how young and scared she sounded. Promise, Elena and Ricardo said together, and as they watched the fire dance under the stars, Amara allowed herself to believe that maybe for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 3 weeks into her stay with the Torres family, Amara still woke up sometimes expecting to find herself back in the group home. But tonight was different. Tonight, the nightmare that had plagued her for years came back with a vengeance. In her dream, she was 4 years old again, hiding under the kitchen table while paramedics worked on her parents. The car accident that took them played out in slow motion, and she could hear herself screaming for her mommy and daddy over and over again. She woke up gasping, tears streaming down her face, her heart racing so fast she thought it might explode. The beautiful bedroom that had become hers felt enormous and dark, and for a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Mommy, she whispered into the darkness, the word she hadn't spoken in 5 years slipping out before she could stop it. Daddy. A gentle knock on her door made her sit up straight, wiping her face quickly. Amara? Sweetheart, are you okay? Elena's voice was soft and concerned. I'm fine, Amara called back, but her voice cracked on the words. The door opened slightly and Elena peeked in. Can I come in? Amara nodded, not trusting her voice. Elena entered wearing a soft purple robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked like what Amara had always imagined a real mother would look like in the middle of the night. Concerned but not annoyed, ready to comfort instead of scold. Bad dream? Elena asked, settling on the edge of the bed. Amara nodded, fresh tears spilling over. I'm sorry I woke you up. Oh honey, you don't need to apologize for having a nightmare. Do you want to talk about it? For 5 years, Amara had learned to handle her nightmares alone. Foster parents had varying degrees of patience for middle-of-the-night wake-ups, and she'd learned it was safer to suffer in silence than risk annoying the adults responsible for her care. But something about Elena's gentle presence made the words tumble out. It was about my parents, she whispered. The accident. I dream about it sometimes, but tonight felt so real. Elena's expression softened with understanding. How old were you when they died? 4. I was in the back seat. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit us. I wasn't hurt, but they didn't make it to the hospital. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. That must have been terrifying. I used to have the nightmares a lot when I first went into care, but they got better for a while. I don't know why they're coming back now. Elena tucked a strand of hair behind Amara's ear. Sometimes when we start to feel safe and happy, our minds let us process things we couldn't handle before. It might mean you're finally in a place where you feel secure enough to work through your grief. Really? Really? Would it help if I stayed with you for a while? In 5 years of foster care, no one had ever offered to stay when she had a nightmare. Amara nodded gratefully, scooting over to make room as Elena settled beside her on top of the covers. My mother used to stay with me when I had bad dreams, Elena said softly. She would tell me stories about brave princesses and magical adventures until I fell back asleep. Would you tell me a story? Elena smiled. I'd love to. She began to weave a tale about a young princess who lived in a beautiful castle but felt lonely because she didn't have a family. The princess went on adventures, helped people in need, and eventually found her way to a kingdom where the king and queen had been waiting their whole lives for a daughter just like her. As Elena spoke, her hand gently stroked Amara's hair, and the tension began to leave her small body. The story wasn't subtle in its parallels to their situation, but somehow that made it more comforting, not less. And they all lived happily ever after, Elena finished softly. Do you think that's really possible? Amara asked drowsily. Happy ever after? I think, Elena said carefully, that happy ever after isn't about never having problems or sad times. I think it's about having people who love you no matter what, people who stay with you through the scary parts and celebrate with you through the good parts. Like you and Ricardo? Like me and Ricardo. Amara was quiet for a moment, then, Elena? Can I ask you something? Anything. Why couldn't you and Ricardo have babies of your own? Elena was quiet for so long that Amara worried she'd asked something wrong. But then Elena spoke, her voice soft and honest. We tried for 10 years. We went to doctors, had treatments, hoped and prayed and wished. But sometimes bodies just don't work the way we want them to. For a long time, I thought it meant we weren't meant to be parents. But you are meant to be parents, Amara said firmly. You're the best parents I've ever had. Elena's breath caught. Thank you, sweetheart. That means more to me than you could possibly know. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, and Amara felt sleep beginning to pull at her again. But just before she drifted off, she had one more question. Elena? If the adoption goes through, would it be okay if I called you Mom? And Ricardo Dad? Elena's answer was whispered through tears. It would be the greatest honor of my life. Amara fell asleep feeling safer than she had since she was 4 years old, with Elena's hand still gently stroking her hair and the promise of a real family wrapping around her like the softest blanket. She woke the next morning to the smell of pancakes and bacon, and for the first time since the nightmare started, she felt rested. Elena was no longer beside her, but there was a note on the nightstand. Good morning, beautiful girl. Come down when you're ready for the best breakfast ever. Love, Mom, if that's okay. Amara hugged the note to her chest, grinning so widely her cheeks hurt. Racing downstairs in her pajamas, she found Ricardo at the stove wearing an apron that read World's Best Dad, and Elena setting the table. Good morning, sunshine, Ricardo said, turning to smile at her. How did you sleep after? Well, after everything? Better, Amara said honestly. Elena. Mom? She told me the most beautiful story. Elena's face lit up at the word Mom, and she opened her arms for a hug. Amara ran into them, feeling like she was finally home. I made your favorite, Ricardo said, flipping a pancake shaped like a butterfly. And I have something special planned for today if you're up for it. What kind of special? Amara asked, settling into her usual chair. Well, I was thinking it might be time for you to see where I work. The foundation has a school dedication today, and I thought you might like to come with me. Amara's eyes widened. She'd heard about Ricardo's foundation but had never seen it in action. Really? I can come with you? If you want to, Elena said, setting a plate of butterfly pancakes in front of her. I'll be working on a manuscript today, but I think it would be wonderful for you to see what Dad does. The word Dad felt natural rolling off her tongue, and from Ricardo's expression, it sounded pretty perfect to him too. 2 weeks later, just as Amara was starting to believe that maybe, possibly, this could be her forever family, the phone call came that threatened to change everything. Amara was in the garden reading one of her new books when she heard Elena's voice through the open kitchen window. The tone made her look up from her page. I understand, Janet, but we've already submitted all the initial paperwork. What do you mean there's been a development? Amara set her book down and moved closer to the window, her heart beginning to race. The Henderson family has what? But I thought. I see. And they're requesting. When? There was a long pause, and Amara could hear Elena moving around the kitchen, the way she did when she was stressed. Tomorrow? Janet, that seems very sudden. Amara is just starting to feel settled. Yes, I understand it's their right, but... No, of course we won't make this difficult. We want what's best for Amara too. When Elena hung up the phone, Amara heard her sigh deeply. A moment later, Ricardo's car pulled into the driveway, and Elena went outside to meet him. Amara couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see them through the garden gate, Elena's hands moving as she explained something, Ricardo's face growing serious. They called her inside a few minutes later, both wearing the careful expressions adults used when they had bad news to deliver. Sweetheart, we need to talk, Elena said, settling on the couch and patting the spot beside her. Amara's stomach dropped, but she sat down, trying to prepare herself for whatever was coming. That was Janet on the phone, Ricardo began. The Henderson family has made a formal request to meet with you again. They've hired a lawyer. What does that mean? Amara asked, though she was afraid she already knew. It means they're challenging our petition to adopt you, Elena said gently. They're arguing that since you were originally matched with them, and since they've completed all the requirements while we're still in process, they should have priority. But I don't want to go with them, Amara said, her voice getting smaller. I want to stay here. With you. We know, baby, Ricardo said, moving to sit on her other side. And we're going to fight for you. Our lawyer says we have options, but what? Elena took her hands. But tomorrow, a social worker is going to come here with the Hendersons. They want to spend the day with you to see if maybe you might change your mind. I won't change my mind, Amara said firmly. We believe you, Elena said. But legally we have to allow this visit. And sweetheart, I need you to understand something important. Amara waited, dreading what was coming next. If the court decides that the Hendersons are a better placement for you, we'll have to let you go. We won't fight a decision that the judge thinks is in your best interest, even if it breaks our hearts. Tears started flowing down Amara's cheeks. You're giving up on me? No, Ricardo said firmly. Never. We're not giving up and we're not going anywhere. But we love you enough to want what's truly best for you, even if that's not us. That evening, the three of them sat together on the couch, Amara curled between Elena and Ricardo like she had that first night. But this time, instead of feeling safe and hopeful, she felt scared and angry. It's not fair, she said for the dozenth time. No, it's not, Elena agreed. A lot of things about your life haven't been fair, sweetheart. But sometimes we have to work within an unfair system to get to the right outcome. What if they make me go with the Hendersons? What if I never see you again? Ricardo's arms tightened around her. That will never happen. Even if you can't live with us, you'll always be our daughter in our hearts. And when you turn 18, when you're an adult and can make your own choices, our door will always be open. But I want to be your daughter now, Amara whispered. You are our daughter now, Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. Nothing and no one can change that. Not the courts, not the agency, not anyone. You're ours and we're yours forever. They spent the rest of the evening doing normal family things. Making dinner together, watching a movie, playing a board game. But underneath the normalcy, they all felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them. When it was time for bed, Elena and Ricardo both came upstairs to tuck her in. Whatever happens tomorrow, Ricardo said, kissing her forehead, remember that we love you. Remember that you're strong and smart and worthy of love. And remember, Elena added, smoothing her hair, that sometimes the right thing takes time, but it always happens eventually. After they left, Amara lay in the dark thinking about the Hendersons. They were nice people, she knew that. They would give her a good home, make sure she had everything she needed, send her to good schools. On paper they were probably the better choice. But they didn't know that she liked her pancakes in shapes, or that she had nightmares about her parents, or that she hummed when she was happy. They didn't know that she was scared of thunderstorms but loved the rain, or that she wanted to be a teacher someday so she could help kids like her. Elena and Ricardo knew all of those things. They knew her. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Amara made a decision. Tomorrow she would be polite and respectful to the Hendersons. But she would also make sure everyone understood exactly where she belonged. She belonged with Elena and Ricardo Torres, the couple who had opened their hearts and home to a scared little girl in a storm. The couple who loved her not despite her past, but because of everything that made her who she was. She belonged with her family. The black sedan arrived at exactly 10 o'clock the next morning, and Amara watched from her bedroom window as the Hendersons stepped out. They looked exactly as she remembered, well-dressed, composed, and formal. Richard carried a briefcase and Margaret held a wrapped present. Janet Morrison emerged from the passenger seat, clipboard in hand, looking every bit as official as Amara expected. Behind them came another woman Amara didn't recognize, wearing a sharp suit and carrying her own briefcase. "That must be their lawyer," Elena said softly, joining Amara at the window. "Are you ready for this, sweetheart?" Amara nodded, though her stomach felt like it was full of butterflies. She dressed carefully that morning in one of the outfits Elena had bought her, a purple dress that made her feel confident and pretty. Elena had braided her hair with tiny purple ribbons, and Ricardo had made her favorite breakfast to give her strength for the day ahead. "Remember," Elena said, giving her a gentle hug, "just be yourself. Tell the truth about how you feel and trust that the right thing will happen." They went downstairs together where Ricardo was waiting in the living room. He smiled when he saw Amara, but she could see the worry in his eyes. "You look beautiful, princess," he said, using the nickname that had emerged naturally over the past few weeks. "Ready to show everyone what a smart, strong girl you are?" The doorbell rang before Amara could answer, and Ricardo went to let their visitors in. The living room suddenly felt crowded with all the adults. Elena and Ricardo, the Hendersons, Janet, and the lawyer who introduced herself as Miss Patricia Williams. "Hello, Amara," Margaret Henderson said, stepping forward with her gift. "It's lovely to see you again. We brought you something." Amara accepted the present politely, unwrapping it to find a beautiful doll with long dark hair and a fancy dress. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. She's very pretty." "We thought you might like her," Richard said. "Margaret has been collecting dolls for years, and she picked this one especially for you." Janet cleared her throat. "Why don't we all sit down and discuss how today is going to work?" They arranged themselves in the living room, Amara sitting between Elena and Ricardo while the others took chairs across from them. The formal atmosphere made Amara feel like she was on trial. "The Hendersons would like to spend the day with Amara," Janet began. "They've planned several activities designed to help you get to know each other better." "What kind of activities?" Elena asked. Ms. Williams consulted her notes. "Lunch at the country club, a visit to the private school they've selected, and some time at their home so Amara can see her potential new room." Amara felt Ricardo tense beside her. She looked up at him and he gave her a reassuring smile, but she could see the effort it took. "That sounds lovely," Elena said diplomatically. "Amara, what do you think?" All eyes turned to her, and Amara felt the familiar pressure of being the center of adult attention. But this time, instead of making her want to disappear, it made her want to speak up. "I think it's nice that Mr. and Mrs. Henderson want to spend time with me," she said carefully. "But I want everyone to know that I'm happy here. I don't want to live anywhere else." Margaret Henderson's smile tightened slightly. "Amara, dear, you've only been here for a few weeks. Sometimes it takes time to understand what's truly best." "I understand," Amara said, sitting up straighter. "I understand that you're nice people who would take good care of me. But Elena and Ricardo don't just take care of me. They love me." "I'm sure they do," Richard said. "But love isn't the only thing that matters in adoption. There are practical considerations: education, stability, long-term planning." "We've prepared extensively for your arrival," Margaret added. "We have a trust fund set up for your college education, we've researched the best therapists to help with your adjustment, and we've already enrolled you in dance and piano lessons." Amara looked at Elena and Ricardo, who remained silent but supportive. She realized that this was her moment to speak for herself, to advocate for what she wanted. "That all sounds very nice," she said politely. "But I don't want dance and piano lessons. I want to help Ricardo build schools and work with Elena on her children's books. I want to stay with the people who know that I like butterfly pancakes and that I have nightmares sometimes and that I want to be a teacher when I grow up." "You want to be a teacher?" Margaret asked, looking surprised. Yes. I want to help kids like me, kids who don't have families. Well, that's very sweet, but you're only 9 years old. You'll change your mind many times before you need to choose a career. Elena spoke up for the first time since the conversation began. Actually, Amara has talked about being a teacher since the day she arrived. She helps the younger children with their homework, she's incredibly patient with them, and she has a natural gift for explaining things in ways kids can understand. She's already shown interest in Ricardo's foundation work too, Ricardo added. She came to a school dedication with me last week and spent the whole day asking thoughtful questions about education and helping communities. Ms. Williams made notes on her pad. That's all very interesting, but the Hendersons have made significant commitments to Amara's future. They've spent considerable time and resources preparing for her adoption. And we appreciate that, Ricardo said. But shouldn't Amara's feelings be the most important consideration? Children don't always know what's best for them, Margaret said. That's why adults make these decisions. Amara had been quiet during this exchange, but something about Margaret's comment made her speak up again. Mrs. Henderson, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. Why do you want to adopt me? Margaret looked taken aback by the directness of the question. Well, because we've always wanted children and we have so much to offer a child in need. But why me specifically? What do you know about me that makes you think we'd be a good family together? The room fell silent. Margaret glanced at Richard, then at Ms. Williams before answering. We know that you're a bright, well-behaved child who deserves a stable home with every advantage we can provide. But what do you know about me as a person? Amara pressed. What makes me happy? What makes me sad? What are my favorite things? Another silence. Finally, Richard said, We're hoping to learn all of those things as we spend time together. Amara nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Elena and Ricardo. Elena, what's my favorite color? Purple, Elena said immediately. But you like it best when it's paired with green because you say they make each other look more beautiful. Ricardo, what do I want to be when I grow up? A teacher, Ricardo said. Specifically, you want to teach second grade because you think that's when kids are old enough to really understand the world but young enough to still believe in magic. Elena, what makes me have nightmares? Missing your parents, Elena said gently. And sometimes when you're really happy during the day, your brain processes grief at night. But you're getting better at talking about your feelings, which helps. Amara turned back to the Hendersons. I'm not trying to be mean, she said. But Elena and Ricardo know me. They don't just want a child to fill a space in their lives. They want me exactly as I am. Could you imagine being a 9-year-old child having to fight for the right to stay with the people who truly love you? Amara's courage in this moment will inspire you. Please subscribe to see how her story unfolds, and let me know in the comments if you think she's making the right choice. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Janet cleared her throat. Perhaps we should proceed with the planned activities. Sometimes spending time together helps clarify everyone's feelings. As they prepared to leave, Elena knelt down to hug Amara goodbye. Remember what we talked about, she whispered. Be yourself, be honest, and trust that everything will work out the way it's supposed to. Ricardo hugged her next. We'll be here when you get back, he said. No matter what happens today, we'll be right here. As Amara walked out to the Hendersons' car, she felt scared but determined. She was going to spend the day being polite and giving them a fair chance, but she was also going to make sure they understood that her heart already belonged to someone else. She belonged to Elena and Ricardo Torres, and no amount of country club lunches or private school tours was going to change that. The country club lunch was exactly what Amara had expected. Formal, quiet, and uncomfortable. She sat at a table covered with crisp white linen, surrounded by adults speaking in hushed tones while servers in bow ties brought course after course of food she didn't recognize. Margaret had ordered for her without asking what she liked, assuming she would enjoy the same Caesar salad and grilled chicken that seemed to be standard fare. Amara ate politely, answering questions about school and her interests, but the conversation felt stiff and scripted. We belong to the tennis club as well, Richard was explaining. Margaret is quite accomplished at the game, and we thought you might enjoy lessons. Do you like tennis, Amara? Margaret asked. I've never played, Amara admitted. But I like to run and play soccer. Soccer is rather rough, don't you think? Margaret said. Tennis is much more refined. Better for proper young ladies. Amara nodded politely but thought about the games of soccer she'd played in the Torres backyard with Ricardo and Elena. They'd all gotten grass stains and laughed until their sides hurt. It had been anything but refined, and it had been perfect. The private school tour was impressive. Whitmore Academy had marble hallways, small class sizes, and teachers who spoke in the same hushed, formal tones as everyone at the country club. The headmistress, Mrs. Blackwell, walked them through classrooms where students sat in perfectly straight rows, their uniforms crisp and their hands folded. "We maintain the highest academic standards," Mrs. Blackwell explained. "Our students consistently score in the top percentiles on standardized tests, and we have a 100% college acceptance rate." "That's wonderful," Margaret said. "Exactly what we want for Amara." They visited the library, which was beautiful but felt more like a museum than a place where children actually read for fun. The art room showcased technically perfect paintings that all looked remarkably similar. The music room was full of classical instruments, but Amara didn't hear any laughter or joy in the melodies being practiced. "What do you think, dear?" Richard asked as they concluded the tour. "It's very nice," Amara said honestly. "The teachers seem very smart. And you'd have every advantage here," Margaret added. "The connections you'd make, the opportunities available to you, it's really quite exceptional." Amara nodded, but she found herself thinking about the public school Elena had shown her near their house. It was smaller, less formal, but the children she'd seen there looked happy. The teacher Elena had introduced her to, Mrs. Garcia, had talked about how they encouraged creativity and celebrated each child's unique talents. The visit to the Henderson home was the most difficult part of the day. Their house was beautiful, there was no denying that. It sat on several acres of perfectly manicured grounds, with a circular driveway and a fountain in the front yard. Inside, everything was pristine and expensive. "This would be your room," Margaret said, opening the door to what looked like a princess bedroom from a magazine. The furniture was white and gold, with a canopy bed draped in pink silk. Shelves full of books were arranged by color rather than content, and a collection of porcelain dolls sat in a glass case. "It's beautiful," Amara said, and she meant it. But it felt more like a display room than a place where a real child would live. "We thought you'd like the pink," Margaret said. "Most little girls do." Amara almost mentioned that purple was her favorite color, but something stopped her. This room had been designed for some idealized version of a little girl, not for her specifically. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the formal living room, where Richard showed her photo albums of their travels and Margaret discussed the various activities they'd planned for her. Ballet lessons, French tutoring, charity galas where she could learn proper social skills. "We've thought of everything," Margaret said proudly. "You'd want for nothing." "I can see that," Amara said. "You've been very thoughtful." As the day wore on, Amara began to understand something important. The Hendersons weren't bad people. They genuinely wanted to provide for a child, to give someone all the advantages they'd never had. But they wanted to provide for an idea of a child, not for her specifically. They wanted a little girl who would fit into their world, who would appreciate the finer things, who would grow up to be a refined young lady who attended charity luncheons and played tennis at the country club. They wanted someone they could mold and shape into their vision of the perfect daughter. Elena and Ricardo wanted Amara exactly as she was, a girl who liked butterfly pancakes and soccer, who had nightmares about her parents and dreams of becoming a teacher. They didn't want to change her or improve her or make her into someone else. They just wanted to love her. When Janet arrived to take her back to the Torres house, Amara was ready with her answer. "Well?" Janet asked as they drove through the tree-lined streets. "What did you think of your day with the Hendersons?" "They're very nice people," Amara said carefully. "And they would give me a lot of opportunities. But..." Amara was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "But they want to adopt a little girl who would fit into their life. Elena and Ricardo want to build a life that fits me." When they arrived back at the Torres house, all the adults gathered in the living room once more. Elena and Ricardo sat close together on the couch, their faces anxious but hopeful. The Hendersons took their seats across from them, Ms. Williams positioned nearby with her ever-present legal pad. "Well, Amara," Janet said, "you've now had the opportunity to spend significant time with both families. Before we discuss next steps, I'd like to hear your thoughts about the day." Amara stood in the middle of the room, feeling the weight of everyone's attention. But this time, instead of making her nervous, it made her feel strong. She had something important to say and she was going to say it clearly. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson," she began, "thank you for today. Your house is beautiful, the school is very impressive, and I can see that you've planned carefully for a daughter." Margaret smiled, looking pleased. "But," Amara continued, "I need you to understand something. I'm not just any little girl who needs a home. I'm Amara Washington. I'm 9 years old, my favorite color is purple, I want to be a teacher, I like to read books about magic, and sometimes I have nightmares about my parents who died when I was 4. The room was completely silent now. You've made a lot of plans for me, but you never asked what I wanted. You ordered my lunch without asking what I liked. You designed a bedroom without knowing my favorite color. You signed me up for activities without finding out what interests me. Margaret's smile began to falter. Elena and Ricardo didn't have any plans when I showed up on their doorstep, Amara continued. But they took the time to get to know me. They learned what makes me happy and what makes me sad. They love me not because I fit into their perfect plan, but because I'm me. She turned to look at Elena and Ricardo, drawing strength from their encouraging expressions. I want to stay with Elena and Ricardo, she said firmly. They're my family now. They chose me and I choose them. Richard Henderson cleared his throat. Amara, you're very young. Sometimes what feels right in the moment isn't what's best in the long term. You're right, Amara said. I am young. But I know what love feels like and I know what home feels like. I've felt it every day since I've been with Elena and Ricardo. Margaret leaned forward. But sweetheart, think about all the advantages we can give you. The education, the travel, the opportunities. I am thinking about them, Amara said. And they're wonderful things. But Elena and Ricardo can give me something more important than advantages. They can give me love that doesn't come with conditions or expectations. They love me for who I am right now, not for who they think I should become. She looked directly at Janet. I know I'm just a kid and maybe my opinion doesn't matter as much as all the legal stuff. But this is my life and I want to spend it with people who see me, really see me and love what they see. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Finally, Ms. Williams spoke. Janet, I think we need to discuss this situation privately with the Hendersons. As the adults began to arrange their next meeting, Amara felt Elena's hand slip into hers. She looked up to see both Elena and Ricardo beaming at her with pride. That was the most eloquent, mature thing I've ever heard anyone say, Ricardo whispered. We're so proud of you for speaking up for yourself, Elena added softly. As the Hendersons gathered their things to leave, Margaret approached Amara one last time. You're a very special little girl, she said. I hope you'll be happy whatever happens. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I hope you find the right little girl for your family too. After everyone left, Amara collapsed onto the couch between Elena and Ricardo, emotionally exhausted but relieved. Do you think it worked? She asked. Do you think they'll let me stay? I don't know what the legal outcome will be, Ricardo said honestly. But I know that you spoke your truth with courage and grace, and that's something to be proud of regardless of what happens next. That night, as Elena tucked her into bed, Amara felt something she'd never experienced before, the knowledge that she had advocated for herself successfully. Whatever happened with the adoption, she had spoken up for what she wanted and needed. She had chosen her family, and now she could only hope that the adults would let her choice stand. 3 days after Amara's declaration, their lawyer, Jennifer Martinez, sat in the Torres' living room with a stack of legal documents and a grim expression. Outside, rain pelted the windows, matching the mood inside the house. I won't sugarcoat this, Jennifer said, adjusting her glasses. The Hendersons' legal team is making a strong case. They've completed all the required training, passed all background checks, and can demonstrate financial stability that exceeds even the highest recommendations. Amara sat between Elena and Ricardo, trying to understand the adult conversation that would determine her future. But what about what Amara wants? Elena asked. Surely her preferences carry some weight. They do, but not as much as we'd like, Jennifer admitted. At 9 years old, her wishes are considered but not determinative. The court's primary concern is what they believe to be in her best interests. And they think that's with the Hendersons? Ricardo asked. On paper, it's hard to argue otherwise. Elite private school, substantial trust fund, established connections, a mother who can stay home full-time. The judge is going to see a lot of advantages. Amara felt her stomach drop. What about us? What about our advantages? Jennifer's expression softened. You have many advantages, sweetheart. Love, understanding, emotional connection. But courts sometimes place more weight on financial stability and institutional resources. So what do we do? Elena asked. We build the strongest case possible. The good news is that your home study went well, your background checks are clean, and your references are glowing. Dr. Patricia Kim, the child psychologist who evaluated Amara, was particularly impressed with how well-adjusted she seems here. Dr. Kim was nice, Amara said, remembering the kind woman who had spent several hours asking her about her feelings and dreams. She noted in her report that you show no signs of anxiety or depression, that you're thriving academically and socially, and that your attachment to Elena and Ricardo appears to be healthy and genuine. That's good, right? Ricardo asked. It's very good. But we need more. We need to demonstrate that you can provide opportunities equal to what the Hendersons are offering, just in different ways. Over the next week, Elena and Ricardo worked tirelessly to strengthen their case. They researched the best public schools in the district and arranged meetings with teachers and administrators. They documented Amara's interests and talents, showing how they planned to nurture her desire to become a teacher. Ricardo arranged for Amara to spend a day at the foundation, meeting with the education team and seeing firsthand how they helped build schools and develop programs for underserved children. Elena connected her with editors and authors who talked about the importance of storytelling and creativity in children's development. I don't understand why we have to prove we're good enough, Amara said one evening as they sat around the kitchen table working on their presentation. I already know you're good enough. Sometimes grown-ups make things more complicated than they need to be, Elena said gently. But we're going to show them what we already know, that love and understanding matter more than money and prestige. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. As the day approached, Amara found herself having trouble sleeping and concentrating on her schoolwork. Elena and Ricardo tried to keep things normal, but she could see the stress in their faces. 2 days before the hearing, Janet Morrison made an unexpected visit. I wanted to check in with everyone before we go to court, she said, settling into the living room with her familiar clipboard. Amara, how are you feeling about everything? Scared, Amara admitted. What if the judge doesn't think Elena and Ricardo are good enough for me? What do you think makes a good family? Janet asked. Amara thought about it seriously. I think a good family is people who love you even when you make mistakes, who want to know what you're thinking and feeling, and who help you become the person you want to be. And do you feel like Elena and Ricardo do those things? Every day, Amara said without hesitation. Janet made notes on her pad. Elena, Ricardo, I have to ask you both directly, are you prepared for the possibility that the court might rule in favor of the Hendersons? Elena reached for Ricardo's hand before answering. We're prepared to accept whatever decision the court makes. But we're not prepared to give up on Amara without fighting for her. And we want the court to understand, Ricardo added, that we're not asking them to choose us because we're perfect parents. We're asking them to choose us because we're the right parents for Amara specifically. How so? Elena spoke up. We know her. We know that she's incredibly empathetic, that she has a gift for connecting with other children, that she's curious about everything and asks thoughtful questions. We know she's healing from loss but that she's not broken. We see her potential not as something to be shaped or molded, but as something to be nurtured and celebrated. The Hendersons would provide material advantages, Ricardo said. But we can provide something that might be more valuable, the freedom to be herself and the support to become whoever she's meant to be. That evening, as they sat in the garden after dinner, Amara asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. What happens if the judge says I have to go with the Hendersons? Elena and Ricardo were quiet for a moment. Finally, Elena spoke. If that happens, we'll be heartbroken, she said honestly. But we'll also support you in making the best of the situation. We'll stay in touch if you want us to, and we'll always be here if you need us. And when you turn 18, Ricardo added, when you're an adult and can make your own decisions, our door will always be open. But I don't want to wait until I'm 18, Amara said, tears starting to fall. I want to be your daughter now. You are our daughter now, Elena said firmly, pulling her close. No matter what any court says, no matter where you live, you will always be our daughter. That's not something anyone can take away from us. The night before the hearing, Amara lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, a judge would decide her future based on legal arguments and financial documents and psychological evaluations. But none of those things could capture what really mattered. That for the first time in 5 years she felt like she belonged somewhere. She thought about her parents, wondering what they would want for her. She imagined them looking down and seeing Elena and Ricardo, seeing how much they loved her, seeing how happy she was. She hoped they would understand that sometimes family isn't about blood or legal documents. Sometimes it's about people who choose to love you and keep choosing to love you, every single day. Tomorrow she would sit in a courtroom while adults decided her fate. But tonight, she was Amara Torres in her heart, regardless of what any piece of paper might say. Judge Patricia Reeves had been handling family court cases for 15 years, and she'd seen every kind of adoption dispute imaginable. But as she reviewed the files for the Torres versus Henderson case, she found herself particularly invested in the outcome. On one side were the Hendersons, financially secure, educationally accomplished, with every advantage money could provide. On the other were the Torres, warm, loving but relatively new to the adoption process. In the middle was 9-year-old Amara Washington, whose clear preference had complicated what should have been a straightforward placement. The courtroom was smaller than Amara had imagined, with wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly yellow. She sat in the front row with Elena and Ricardo, wearing the purple dress Elena had bought her for special occasions. Across the aisle, the Hendersons sat with their lawyer, looking as composed and formal as ever. Judge Reeves called the session to order and reviewed the basic facts of the case. Then she did something unexpected. "I've read all the reports, evaluations and recommendations," she said. "But before we proceed with formal arguments, I'd like to speak with Amara privately in my chambers." Amara felt her heart jump into her throat. Elena squeezed her hand reassuringly. "It's okay, sweetheart," Elena whispered. "Just tell her the truth." Judge Reeves' chambers were less intimidating than the courtroom, with family photos on the desk and children's drawings taped to the wall. The judge gestured for Amara to sit in a comfortable chair across from her desk. "Those are from my grandchildren," Judge Reeves said, noticing Amara looking at the drawings. "They think my office is very boring, so they help me decorate." Amara smiled, feeling slightly less nervous. "Amara, I want you to know that this conversation is just between us. I'm not going to tell anyone what we talk about unless you say it's okay. Can you tell me in your own words why you want to stay with Elena and Ricardo?" Amara had practiced this answer in her head dozens of times, but now that the moment was here, she found herself speaking from her heart instead. "Because they love me for who I am," she said simply. "When I showed up at their door in the rain, they didn't see a problem to solve or a project to fix. They just saw a little girl who needed help and they helped me. What makes you feel loved by them? Lots of things. Elena stays with me when I have nightmares about my parents. Ricardo makes my pancakes in fun shapes because it makes me smile. They listen when I talk about wanting to be a teacher, and they don't try to change my mind or tell me to pick something better." Judge Reeves nodded thoughtfully. "The Hendersons have offered you many advantages: private school, travel opportunities, financial security. Don't those things matter to you?" "They do matter," Amara said honestly. "And I'm grateful that they wanted to give me those things. But Elena and Ricardo give me something I've never had before: a family that feels real." "What do you mean by real?" Amara thought about how to explain it. "In foster care, the families were always nice to me, but I always felt like I was visiting someone else's life. With Elena and Ricardo, I don't feel like I'm visiting. I feel like I belong. And if I decided that the Hendersons could provide better opportunities for your future, then I would go with them because you're the judge and you know more than me," Amara said. "But I would be sad every day because my heart belongs with Elena and Ricardo." After their conversation, Judge Reeves called everyone back into the courtroom. She listened as both legal teams presented their arguments, reviewing financial documents, educational plans and psychological evaluations. Ms. Williams argued eloquently for the Hendersons, emphasizing their preparedness, their resources and their long-standing commitment to adoption. Jennifer Martinez countered with evidence of Amara's emotional well-being with the Torres family and their ability to provide love-based rather than resource-based parenting. Then Judge Reeves surprised everyone again. "I'm going to postpone my decision for 2 weeks," she announced. "During that time, I'm ordering an intensive home study for both families, conducted by Dr. Sarah Chin, one of our most experienced child welfare specialists." Both legal teams looked surprised. Home studies had already been completed for both families. "Your Honor," Ms. Williams began, "both families have already passed their home studies." "Standard home studies, yes," Judge Reeves interrupted. "But this case is far from standard. Dr. Chen will be conducting what we call a child-centered evaluation. She'll spend extended time with Amara in both homes, observing natural family interactions rather than formal interviews." Amara looked at Elena and Ricardo, who appeared hopeful but cautious. "Dr. Chen will observe daily routines, family dynamics, and most importantly, Amara's comfort level and happiness in both environments. This evaluation will carry significant weight in my final decision." Over the next 2 weeks, Dr. Chin became a familiar presence in both households. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner that made Amara feel comfortable talking to her. At the Henderson house, Dr. Chin observed formal family dinners where conversations centered around current events and educational topics. She watched as Margaret helped Amara with homework using structured learning techniques, and as Richard discussed college preparation strategies for a 9-year-old. The Hendersons were unfailingly polite and proper. They demonstrated their ability to provide excellent educational opportunities, cultural enrichment, and financial security. But Dr. Chin noticed that Amara seemed to shrink into herself in their presence, becoming quieter and more formal. "How do you feel when you're here?" Dr. Chin asked Amara during one of their private conversations. "Like I need to be very good," Amara replied. "Like I need to be the kind of daughter they want." "And how do you feel when you're with Elena and Ricardo?" "Like I can just be me." At the Torres house, Dr. Chin observed a very different dynamic. She watched Elena and Amara work together in the garden, talking about everything from flowers to dreams while getting dirt under their fingernails. She saw Ricardo teaching Amara to cook, letting her crack eggs even though some shell pieces ended up in the bowl. She observed family movie nights where they debated the merits of different films, homework sessions where Elena patiently helped Amara work through difficult math problems, and bedtime routines that included story time and gentle conversations about the day. Most importantly, she saw Amara blossom in their presence. The quiet, formal child she'd observed at the Hendersons became animated, curious, and genuinely happy with Elena and Ricardo. "The difference is remarkable," Dr. Chin wrote in her preliminary notes. "While both families are capable of providing excellent care, the child's emotional responses vary significantly between environments." During her final week of observation, Dr. Chin asked Amara to draw pictures of her life with both families. The drawing of the Henderson household showed a neat house with formal figures standing in straight lines. The drawing of the Torres household showed a warm, colorful scene with 3 figures hugging, plants growing everywhere, and hearts floating in the sky. "Can you tell me about these pictures?" Dr. Chin asked. "This one," Amara said, pointing to the Henderson drawing, "shows what my life would look like. Very nice and proper and good." "And this one?" "This one shows what my life feels like with Elena and Ricardo. Happy and warm and full of love." Dr. Chen's final report was comprehensive and detailed, but one section stood out. While both families demonstrate the ability to care for Amara adequately, there is a marked difference in the child's emotional well-being between the two environments. With the Torres family, Amara exhibits signs of secure attachment, emotional openness, and age-appropriate confidence. Her academic performance has improved, her social skills have developed, and she shows no signs of the anxiety or depression often seen in children with her background. Most significantly, Amara demonstrates a strong sense of belonging with the Torres family that was not observed with the Henderson family. She refers to them as mom and dad, naturally, includes herself in family decisions and shows pride in their relationship. These are indicators of healthy attachment that typically take months or years to develop, yet have occurred naturally and quickly in this placement. It is this evaluator's professional opinion that while the Henderson family could provide excellent material advantages, the Torres family provides the emotional foundation necessary for Amara's continued healing and development. When Dr. Chen's report was submitted to the court, both legal teams knew that the case had taken a decisive turn. The question was no longer about resources or preparation. The question was about what kind of life would allow Amara to truly thrive. As they waited for the final hearing, Amara felt cautiously optimistic. She had told her truth, showed her authentic self, and trusted that the adults would make the right decision. Now all she could do was hope that love would prove stronger than money, and that belonging would matter more than advantages. The night before the final hearing, Elena found her in the garden, reading under the fairy lights Ricardo had strung between the trees. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Elena asked, settling beside her on the bench. "A little," Amara admitted. "But also hopeful." Dr. Chin seemed to understand. She did. "And whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that these past few months have been the best of our lives. You've made us a family, Amara. That's not something that can be taken away, no matter what any court decides." As they sat together in the peaceful garden, surrounded by the warmth and love that had become Amara's whole world, she allowed herself to believe that tomorrow would bring the answer she'd been hoping for. The courtroom was packed for the final hearing. Word had spread about the unusual case, and several social workers, child advocates, and even some reporters had come to observe. But Amara only had eyes for Judge Reeves as she entered the courtroom carrying a thick folder. "I have reviewed all evidence, reports, and evaluations in this case," Judge Reeves began. "I have also spent considerable time considering what would be in the best interests of Amara Washington." Amara felt Elena's hand tighten around hers. On her other side, Ricardo sat perfectly still, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. The Henderson family has presented an impressive case. They have demonstrated financial stability, educational planning, and a commitment to providing every material advantage a child could need. Their home study was exemplary, their references impeccable, and their dedication to adoption preparation was thorough and commendable. Amara's heart sank. It sounded like the judge was about to rule in favor of the Hendersons. The Torres family, while newer to the adoption process, has also demonstrated admirable qualities. Their home study revealed a warm, nurturing environment, strong community connections, and a deep understanding of child development and trauma recovery. Judge Reeves paused to look directly at Amara. But this case ultimately isn't about which family looks better on paper. It's about which placement will allow Amara Washington to thrive as the unique individual she is. The judge opened the thick folder and began reading from Dr. Chen's report. Dr. Chen's evaluation revealed significant differences in Amara's emotional well-being between the two placements. While both families demonstrated competence in child care, only one placement showed evidence of genuine emotional attachment and belonging. Amara held her breath. Dr. Chen noted that Amara exhibited remarkable emotional growth, increased confidence, and signs of secure attachment in the Torres household. Most significantly, she observed that Amara had developed what she termed authentic family bonds with Elena and Ricardo Torres. Judge Reeves looked up from the report. In my 15 years on the family court bench, I have learned that children need more than material advantages to thrive. They need emotional security, authentic love, and the freedom to be themselves within the safety of family bonds. She closed the folder and looked directly at Amara. Amara, you have shown remarkable maturity and wisdom throughout this process. You have advocated for yourself with grace and honesty, and you have helped us all understand what family truly means. Judge Reeves turned her attention to the adults in the courtroom. Therefore, I am granting the petition for adoption filed by Elena and Ricardo Torres. I am confident that this placement serves Amara's best interests and will provide her with the loving, supportive family environment she needs to reach her full potential. The courtroom erupted. Elena burst into tears, Ricardo pulled them both into a fierce hug, and Amara felt like her heart might explode from happiness. Across the aisle, she saw Margaret Henderson wiping away tears, but they were smiling through them. After the formal proceedings were completed and the paperwork was signed, Margaret Henderson approached their family. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "It's clear that you're exactly what Amara needs." "Thank you," Elena said, still emotional. "That means a great deal coming from you." Margaret knelt down to Amara's level. "You're a very special girl and you taught me something important about what makes a real family. I hope you'll be very happy." "I hope you find your little girl too," Amara said, giving Margaret a hug. "We will," Margaret said. "And thanks to you we'll know to look for the right match, not just any match." 6 months later, on a sunny Saturday morning, the Torres family gathered in the same courtroom for the adoption finalization ceremony. This time the atmosphere was purely celebratory. Extended family members, friends from the foundation and Elena's publishing house, and even Dr. Chen had come to witness the official moment. Amara wore a new purple dress, her hair adorned with tiny white flowers that Elena had carefully placed that morning. Elena and Ricardo looked radiant, holding hands as they stood before Judge Reeves one final time. "Amara Elena Torres," Judge Reeves said with a smile, "by the power vested in me by the state, I declare you to be the legal daughter of Elena and Ricardo Torres, with all the rights and privileges thereof." She banged her gavel and the courtroom erupted in applause and cheers. Amara was officially home. The celebration continued at the Torres house, where Elena had organized a garden party. Tables were covered with purple tablecloths, Elena's famous butterfly pancakes were served alongside regular party food, and a photographer captured every precious moment. But the best moment came that evening, when the guests had gone home and the three of them sat in the garden where they'd had so many important conversations. "How does it feel to be Amara Torres?" Ricardo asked, pulling her onto his lap. "Perfect," Amara said simply. "Like puzzle pieces finally fitting together." "You know what I realized today?" Elena said, settling beside them on the bench. "We spent so much time worrying about whether we'd be good enough parents for you. But you were the one who taught us how to be a real family." "All I did was love you," Amara said. "Exactly," Ricardo said, kissing the top of her head. "And you showed us that love isn't about being perfect or having all the advantages. It's about choosing each other every single day." As they sat together under the fairy lights, surrounded by the garden they'd planted together and filled with the dreams they'd shared, Amara thought about her journey. She'd started as an orphan with nothing but a torn backpack and a broken heart. But along the way she discovered that the most important things in life couldn't be bought or planned or arranged by adults. The most important things happened when people opened their hearts to each other and chose to build something beautiful together. She'd found her forever family not because she'd been delivered to the right address, but because she'd been brave enough to recognize love when she found it, and strong enough to fight for what mattered most. "I love you, Mom." "I love you, Dad," she whispered as the stars came out above them. "We love you too, sweetheart," Elena and Ricardo said together. "Forever and always." And as Amara drifted off to sleep that night in her own room in her own house, with her own family just down the hall, she knew that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the simplest truth, that every child deserves to be loved exactly as they are, by people who choose them not despite their imperfections, but because of everything that makes them uniquely, wonderfully themselves. The wrong address had led her to exactly the right place and she was finally, completely, perfectly home.